The worst nightmare in this role is that you'd look out and your speakers aren't there. But there they are. Isn't that great? We are so glad to have Dick and Betsy DeVos with us tonight. And I'm going to ask if they would, or did I miss them? Good, thank you. If they'd come on up, and they're already wired up and mic'd, and they're going to sit here, and then we're going to move the podium back, and we're going to have a conversation. Many of you know Dick and Betsy. I promised, if you were here last year, you remember my brilliant introduction of Chuck Colson. He told us later on it was the single worst introduction he'd ever had because I got up and froze. I couldn't remember knowing Chuck. And everything I knew about Chuck just went right out the door. And but I'm not going to do that with Dick and Betsy because these are two wonderful people that I've known for 10 or 12 years in one capacity or another. The biography that's in the book is pretty simple. It's the biography that's not in the book that we're going to talk some about tonight. We're going to talk about family. We're going to talk about where they came from. We're going to talk about where they see themselves going to, what they care about, what the issues of their heart are. We're going to talk about their kids, and we're just going to have a good time with them tonight. Y'all ready for a good time? They're ready for a good time. So we're going to do this for about 25 minutes or until I run out of questions. And then we're going to take questions from you. So they have agreed that they're willing to do that with you all. I told them they could trust you. And so we're going to do this for about 25 minutes, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Dick and Betsy are the founders of the Dick and Betsy DeVos Foundation. Dick, as many of you know, is the president of Alticor, the parent company of Amway Corporation, Access Business Group, Quickstar Incorporated, and Pixis Innovations Incorporated. Betsy is the chairman of the WinQuest Group and chairman of Choices for Children and the past chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. They both serve on numerous, and that is numerous, political and community boards. Dick and Betsy have 4 children and reside in Ada, Michigan. And we are so glad that they're with us tonight. And if you would give them a short burst of applause, it'll allow me to jump into this chair and wire up.
That was plenty enough.
Plenty of applause? All right, good. Well, we said something about a biography that's not the book. And the whole point of the gathering is the joy of giving. And not many of us come to giving with no history at all. And I think it'd be really interesting for people to hear some of your giving biography. How did you grow up among givers, or did you grow up among givers? And it was different for both of you. How was that? Tell us something about your parents and your family and your growing up.
Well, different because we had different parents, obviously. So it's never quite the same. Many people in the Christian community have become familiar with my father being a public speaker, and have asked, what's it like to grow up with him as your father? And my standard response has been, I really don't know. He's the only father I've ever had. I have nothing to compare him to. So we have each our own experience, and yet it's very much a parallel situation. For me, growing up in a Christian home, a decidedly Christian home, my parents gave as much a part of their life as breathing. It was just something that was always a part of our home. It was never a decision. It was just a part of life. And that was certainly, it started with the church, in our case, and support for the church, but as resources became more available, It expanded to include broader community involvements and giving into community, as well as continuing along with a philosophy extending from our faith into the political realm of giving in the area of politics as well. So for me, it's been something I've had the privilege of growing up and watching.
You've known about giving all your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Betsy?
Well, although I have different parents than Dick, obviously, I was blessed to grow up in a Christian home as well. And for my family, it was much the same way. Giving was a part of my memory ever since I was a young child. My dad started a business when I was about 9 years old. And as that business grew, you can't hear in the back there. Sorry. I'll talk a little louder. Is that better? As my father's business grew, my parents were able to give more and more of their resources. And it was just by example, really, that I learned to give. Their actions spoke much louder than their words ever did. And that's just a blessing that I grew up with, and one which we hope we are able to pass on to our children as well. I'd like to note that we have one of our children with us, and she's going to be really embarrassed to have me introduce her, but our second child, our 16-year-old daughter, Alyssa, is here with us. Alyssa, stand up a minute.
That's right. That's the truth. That'll be the truth teller. If you don't buy anything we've said, you can check it out with her.
How many of you have your children here with you? But would those children stand? There's a lot of talk in the gathering about children, and it's a lot of good talk. This is probably the most offspring, I don't want to call them children, but offspring we've ever had. Did you grow up aware that your families were somewhat different in their capacity to give?
Let me start with that one, because, both of us are children of entrepreneurs, and we, through most of my childhood, it was pretty much a normal childhood as compared to all my friends and neighbors. And so it wasn't until, for both of us, until we were well into our high school and college years that there was a noticeable difference between what our parents could do versus other parents. So that was not a unique experience for us. For our younger siblings, it was the case. And you'd have to ask them how it was for them to get a comparison. But for us, it was pretty much a normal childhood growing up.
Same for Dick?
Same, absolutely the same, yeah.
Because I know a lot of kids are surprised when they find out that somehow they're different. And suddenly it just falls in on them. But you were included in the giving.
And sometimes that happens, and I think it's, with families, it's unfortunate if that happens because information was withheld. In our case, information was always available to us about our situation. Our parents did involve us in giving, made it very much a part of the family with things that they were doing. Not everything necessarily. There were always things that they were doing quietly, just not because they were trying to keep it secret, but just that they were doing quietly, that they didn't necessarily bring us in. But it was done in a very much an open spirit within the family, and so it provided us the privilege of watching and learning about the process that they went through in decision making, given a larger number of opportunities to support them than resources. How did they sort through that, and how did they? What were their motivations for giving their drives, and it was just a great experience to be able to share it openly with them.
So they really talked to you about it. It wasn't a secret, the giving.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was. Well, there were parts of it that were a secret, though, in Betsy's family. Betsy's father, who's been gone now for a little over 5 years. If you ever had a secret and you wanted a man in this world who could keep it, he was the guy. He could keep it very, very quiet, and it was a real joy for us to have actually found out a bunch of stuff with people when he passed away very, very suddenly. And the number of people that came in the days and weeks that followed that had said what he had given or what a difference he had made in their life, in small ways. We were speaking to someone, found out there was a van for a handicapped child, and he'd provided a few thousands of dollars, but it made the difference to allow this family to buy a van so that they could transport their child. And we had never even heard about this, but it was something that was put on his heart to help this family, and he just did so in a quiet way, and that brought some of those things did bring some real joy to us.
So it feels great to hear those stories even now when people come up to you and say, I want you to know what your father and your mother did for us.
Absolutely. One of the things, though, that I think was important for us to observe, and which we have carried on in our relationship, is the fact that both of our parents were involved in those decisions. And I know in some cases it's one spouse or the other that often makes those decisions, but I think it's been very beneficial for me to see both my parents involved in those decisions and discussions from early on. And because my dad did pass away suddenly and my mother was suddenly left with a foundation that was a pretty substantial responsibility, it was nothing that was new or strange to her. It was something that she could continue to work with and make good decisions about, because she had that experience all along.
How are you doing things differently or the same with your children now? Does it vary from child to child, or are you trying to just, well, you know what I'm trying to ask?
They'll vary from child to child, or different than our growing up experience.
Yeah.
Well, in our situation, and again, for those of you that don't know us, we live in Ada, Michigan, which is a sort of a bedroom community of Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is a relatively small town, maybe 500,000 people in the Grand Rapids community. And within the context of that community, our family is known because of the business success and thankfully for philanthropy, for giving into the community over a number of years. And so our children grow up in a very different environment than the environment that we grow up in terms of the expectations and the pressures and the visibility that they have and the issues that they have to deal with. When they go to a show, as we went to a traveling Broadway show recently, they don't go to this corner theater, they go to a place known as DeVos Hall. And that puts a special burden on a child, on a teenager especially. So the situation with them is different. I think we have to deal with it very differently than our circumstance may have been growing up. And we think it's so critically important that we do all that we can, both in word and in deed, and by example, even more importantly, to communicate the importance of giving in the same way it was communicated to us.
So open information is still really important in teaching children about giving and about wealth.
And giving them the opportunity to give themselves at a younger age to learn that habit and to get into the habit of giving. I mean, all of the children receive monthly amounts, and a portion of that goes immediately into the tithing, and they have their own charitable checking accounts, which they of course check with us on making the contributions. But we feel it's important for them to have the responsibility, even starting at a young age. Our 10-year-old has his account that he is able to make decisions, and most recently it was the American Red Cross, as you might imagine. But we think it's really important for them to have that opportunity to experience that starting at young ages, so that when they do reach adulthood, that this is not something that's new and different to them.
since you did have different parents, how did you all meet?
Through his old roommate.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Who I dated a couple of times, but not very often.
That's all right. I was dating your cousin at the time.
Yeah.
It's a small town.
It worked out as a very small.
But the cousin was from Canada, so I don't know how that worked.
Betsy was going to school in Grand Rapids, and we met through my roommate, and discovered, to our great surprise, that our families had summer homes within half a mile of each other. We'd never met, so it was quite something.
That's great. You've been married how long?
22 years.
That's great.
That was the same answer I was going to give. I was just hoping I was right.
You all recently, or maybe not so recently, have become very active in education. And I asked you once, in fact, for the newsletter, I said that when you are a high visibility person, sometimes it's easier to choose a low visibility issue. I mean, why make yourself a target? And yet you've chosen one of the lightning rods of American culture, which is education. Now, why did you do that? Why did you take that risk?
It had no intellectual basis at all. It really didn't. Because I think for all the reasons you've articulated, it's education in America is a massive system, tremendous political pressures and dynamics around it, all sorts of emotion and history, and a purely intellectual exercise wouldn't have led us there. But the Lord did lead us there quietly by the heart. First, to lead me into being encouraged to run as a business person, to run for the State Board of Education, which in Michigan is an elective position. And so I was elected to the State Board of Education in 1990 in Michigan. And my career was such that I could devote the time to it. I served in that position for 2 years before my career changed. I went back to what was then the Amway business, now Alticor, to head it up, and was not able to continue serving on the board. But it had opened a window for us to see what was happening within education. That led us to an exposure to a program that was a very fledgling program of providing tuition support, and that led us right by the heart straight into education. Maybe Betsy wants to talk about Education Freedom Fund and how that got us going.
Well, I'm sure many in this room are familiar with scholarship programs that have popped up all over the country that really focus on K through 12, often K through 8, but sometimes K through 12 students, low-income children whose families don't have an opportunity to choose where their children go to school. We lead a program in Michigan which is currently funding we split the program off last year. It was until last year it was 4,000 students. The portion that we are funding this year or helping to support this year supplies scholarships to 2,000 students in Michigan, which we feel, there's multiple times the number of families that apply for these scholarships. And our experience with that really demonstrated to us the need for fundamental change. And my background has always been in politics and in partisan politics, and that's kind of where I like to mix it up. And Michigan has a very restrictive constitution as to how you could possibly even begin to reform education. So the combination of our leadership in the scholarship program and our real heartfelt desire to see change for more than just the couple of thousand kids we're able to help led us to be involved with an initiative in Michigan which was not successful last year, but which has spurred the debate, and our efforts continue in Michigan, as do many folks in other states around the country. But as Dick said, this is not something that we sat back 10 years ago and calculated that this was something we needed to do. It really is something that's grabbed us by the heart over the years. And all you need to do is look at the letters that some of these single moms write, just pleading for a chance to give their child a better a better education, and that's enough to motivate you for a good long time.
That's really where I said where God let us buy the heart into this issue, because we were involved in doing involved in helping with the scholarships, and that was a real privilege. And we'd get these letters back from these moms, and we have a very small staff that does the project, and they just ship over a stack of letters. And Betsy and I learned very quickly to not sit and read these letters in the wrong places, because we would invariably end up sitting there weeping together. And so we thought this was probably not a good thing to be sitting in airports or especially not driving a car. We'd read the letters, and you'd get the letters on yellow legal pad. You'd get them on on drugstore paper. You'd see the pens. It would be pencils. It would be terrible spelling, awful grammar, clearly evident of a parent or a grandparent who had missed the opportunity for an education, oftentimes through no fault of their own, because the system missed them, and so desperately desiring an education for their children. You just could not help but sit and cry for the kids that you're not able to help, who are caught in that situation. I quote it often from a single mom in Detroit, writing, thanking us for a scholarship, and we're learning recently now to not, when someone says thank you for what we do or what we are privileged to be able to do, instead of saying thank you, our response that we're learning now is to say bless God, because it's through Him that we're able to do what we do, not because of anything we have. So whenever I say that, just please know it's really a bless God thing. But this mom, terrible penmanship again, but putting a point on it, said, I went to the Detroit public schools. She said, I went all the way through to ninth grade. Nobody cared. They just passed me along. Nobody told me I could ever be anything. Nobody ever told me that I was okay. They just passed me along. In ninth grade, I quit. But my son is going to get an education. And you could just, the passion of that, how can you not help but stand with it?
I've read some of the newspaper articles in the Michigan papers, and some of the reporters have said these people and people like them are obviously anti-public schools and want to destroy our public schools in favor of sending everyone to private schools. So are you?
No, we are for good education and for having every child have an opportunity for a good education. And having grown up in families that are in the business world, we both believe that competition and choices make everyone better. And that ultimately, if the system that prevails in the United States today had more competition, if there were other choices for people to make freely, that all of the schools would become better as a result, and that excellence would be sought in every setting. And so we're very strong proponents of fundamentally changing the way we approach education. And we understand it's going to be a long process to get there for everyone, but every child is special and unique, and every child deserves a chance to have a good education. And the fact that we could decide where each of our 4 children went without a second thought about it, we remind ourselves of that often, because there are hundreds of thousands and millions of children in this country that are forced to go every day to a school that's not meeting their needs, and it's just not right.
As we look at the policy issue, I would just encourage those who are interested in this to look at public schools, because we use the word public school, and what we're really talking about is the concept of public education. And so what I tried to explain to people in the midst of our campaign was to challenge folks to say, let's look past your own history. Look at what is the objective of public education. What should it be within our community? It ought to be in our community offering every child, no matter where they come from, no matter what their background, economically or otherwise, the very best educational opportunity we can provide. Isn't that what public education is, as opposed to exclusive education or discriminating education? This is about allowing every child that desires an education to achieve that highest level education. Now, let's not confuse that very laudable concept with the way we've currently applied it in America, which is forcing people to operate within what are in most cases, government-run schools. That is an execution. That is an attempt to deliver this higher promise. The real promise that has been one of the great things for America has been access to quality education. It hasn't been the way we've delivered it.
But wouldn't it have been easier to simply fund Christian private schools and be done with it? Just build up great Christian private schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the fact is, there are not enough philanthropic dollars in America to fund what is currently the need in education. We could give every single penny we had. Everybody in this room could give every single penny that they had, and it wouldn't begin to touch what is currently spent on education every year in this country, and what is, in many cases, not efficiently spent or not well spent. So our desire, and this is another thing that we learned a couple of years ago. We went on a trip to Israel with a marvelous teacher who talked about the geography in Israel, where the coastal plain where the pagans lived and the Israelites lived in the foothills, and the crescent in between was called the Shephelah. And he really challenged all of us on that trip to be active in the Shephelah where the cultures meet. And that has been something that has been really impactful for both Dick and me, is to continue to think about where we can be the most effective or make the most impact in the culture in which we live today. And so, our desire is to be in that Shephelah, to confront the culture in which we all live today in ways which will continue to help advance God's kingdom, but not to, stay in our own little safe territory.
It would have been a lot easier and a lot less controversial to just go fund the small number of private schools that possibly we could have funded. But what about those kids in the urban community in Detroit that wouldn't have the ability to access? And what are we going to do to drive for better performance across all of our education? It was a systemic view that we looked at, and it was working within that Shephelah to allow for our Christian worldview to be our Christian worldview, which for us comes from a Calvinist tradition, which is to be very much a part of the world, and to provide for a greater opportunity, even more expanded opportunity someday for all parents to be able to educate their children in a school that reflects their worldview, and not each day sending their child to a school that may be reflecting a worldview quite antithetical, which unfortunately is the case in some places, to the worldview that they hold in their family.
Some people, maybe even in this room, would say, why waste your dollars on non-Christian things? Just support Christian things. Why get involved in politics? Why get involved in public education? Why do those things? I mean, if you're really going to be a Christian, just fund Christian things. You've chosen not to do that.
Well, I think it goes back to what I just mentioned, the concept of really being active in the Shephelah of our culture, to impact our culture in ways that are not the traditional funding the Christian organization route, but that really may have greater kingdom gain in the long run by changing the way we approach things, in this case, the system of education in the country.
Let me just take you to a quick trip to an archaeological dig in the Shephelah in Israel. And the archaeologists in this particular community, which was between where the pagans lived on the coastal plain, where the Philistines lived, and where the Israelites lived up in the mountains. And as the archaeologists went down, they found that they found in various food storage areas, they found varying layers as the years went by, whereas some layers were completely devoid of pig bones and pig remains, and other layers there was pig remains integrated throughout that community. Now, if you're familiar with Jewish tradition, obviously pigs are not kosher. Those were not acceptable for eating. So if in fact the Jewish people were influencing that community, the pig bones were gone. They were out of there. And so there were periods of time when the Jewish community was influencing that town, and there were times where obviously they took, and their influence wasn't being felt at all. The pig bones were right back in. So the question that we continue to challenge with is to say we can run away and just go back up into the hills,
right,
and live very safely and very comfortably, or are we going to exist on the Shephelah and try to impact the view of the community around us with the ideas that we believe are more powerful ideas of a better way to live one's life and a more meaningful and a more rewarding way to live one's life as a Christian than to just run away in the hills and allow the world to spin around us. And we keep going back and say, our job is to figure out in a contemporary context, how do we get the pig bones out of our culture?
It's a great image. How many of you are interested in education one way or another here?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to open it up. And it's not just about education, but it's about, now I've checked with them, and I said you'd behave yourselves. You wouldn't ask anything off color, anything like that. But I think this is a good opportunity for you to ask what's been going through your mind as you've been listening to Dick and Betsy talk. What would you like to know about their giving, or their family, or their interest in education, or politics, or the community? You have a question, and if you would speak loudly, and if I need to, I'll either repeat it. In your case, I might rephrase it. And so, no, come on, Richard. Ask the question. As a percentage of your giving, how much have you shifted toward what the Lord has burdened you with toward education?
I'm looking back at Ginny Vanderhart here. She probably knows that answer better than we do.
Ginny is the director of, she operates many of our family foundations, including ours. Ginny, do you?
And she's madly working on a calculator.
It's Ginny's birthday today.
It's her birthday today, too. So
it's Ginny's birthday. Happy birthday, Ginny.
to 40% in it to education. That would be inclusive of both Christian. That's both direct support for Christian education, for the scholarship programs that we're involved with, and some other education impact areas.
But a lot of our giving in the past couple of years has been by nature of the initiative we were involved with had to be political giving, which of course is not doesn't fall under the foundation, and so it would have been probably a little bit higher percentage the last couple of years. But
if this became a model, would you see yourself putting more into it?
I would say that, more than half of our giving ultimately is in some way involved with education, but we are involved with a lot of Christian schools and this Education Freedom Fund program, which I would define as ultimately Christian in its nature, because actually in excess of 90% of the parents who receive these scholarships choose some Christian school for their child to go to. And I mean, you could probably define it any number of ways, but that is really our primary focus.
Rusty?
I'm just curious if you found any way to, what your thoughts are, first of all, and then very way that you put down sort of that.
What are your thoughts on homeschooling?
We like homeschooling a lot. I'm not so sure our daughters do. They homeschooled for 3 years. But
Homeschool is a tough issue to get at from a public policy standpoint, and is, in the case of Michigan, we found it very difficult, and therefore were not able to find a way in our initiative to include homeschooling within the voucher initiative that we were advocating. Although I think the imagery of homeschooling has shifted dramatically given the very positive results from many homeschool experiences, it still is easily critiqued and from a public policy standpoint has been a hard one to break through. The only thing that I've seen actually recently that was very impressive that I would commend to homeschoolers to consider is to check out an organization called K-12. Bill Bennett has been involved with developing a curriculum. His people, I just met with his people and spoke with Bill a couple days ago. He reviews this curriculum personally. It's online. It's self-paced. It really is reflective, although it's not specifically Christian. It is designed for a full public school environment. It is very clearly consistent with Bill's and our shared Christian worldview. And from what I have seen of it, it could be a very valuable tool for homeschoolers and for homeschoolers to consider. I would recommend it.
I've got a question from Bob Schoolfield, and then right over here.
I want to throw you a softball. Earlier in the history of the United States, the church pretty well dominated education in the United States. But things have changed since then. And my question is, what happened? And then the second question is, what will it take to get the church serious about education?
Things have changed since the early part of this country's history in terms of education, and what will it take to the church involvement, and what will it take to change it back?
I'm not a historian to the extent of trying to unpack everything that resulted in the church moving away, but in my opinion, the church has sadly retrenched from its center role in our community, to where now, as we look at many communities in our country, the church, which ought to be, in our view, far more central to the life of the community, has been displaced by the public school as the center for activity, the center for what goes on in the community. Here was an interesting challenge we had within the context of our political campaign. We had parents who were very much interested in reforming and changing the public school and having a voucher opportunity in some of the urban settings to get out of the schools. And their pastors were very supportive because they knew that the education they were getting was bad. Second problem for the pastors and for those churches, the biggest employer in their community was the public school. The church has, in many segments of the church, have lost their voice when it comes to this particular issue. And thankfully now, I think many are finding their voice. It is certainly our hope that churches would continue, no matter what the environment, whether there's government funding someday through tax credits or vouchers or some other mechanism, or whatever it may be, that more and more churches will get more and more active and engaged in education. We just could think of no better way to rebuild our families and our communities than to have that circle of church and school and family much more tightly focused and being built on a consistent worldview.
If I can just add to that very quickly, I think for many years the church in general has felt that it's important for the children of the congregation to be in the schools to make a difference. But in fact, I think what's happened in many cases in the last couple of decades is that the schools have impacted the kids more than the kids are able to impact the schools. I mean, young children need to have a pretty solid foundation to be able to combat the kind of influences that they're presented with almost on a daily basis.
We've got 3 more questions, one here, and one way at the back of the room, and then Dick and Betsy have agreed, we'll have to save that one, I'm sorry, have agreed to be and I don't even know what kind of tree this is, but it's called Boojum, and it's across the hall, and we're going to do an up close and personal with Betsy, and if you want to spend, with Dick and Betsy, excuse me, and if you want to spend time with them, they're very open to discussing this topic and other topics as well. So let's do 3 questions.
Yes. Thank you for letting God call you into using time, talent, and money in these 3 different areas. The traditional charitable, which certainly includes religious and educational, and the tax deductible 501c3 and so on. And then the public policy, I imagine you had to create a 501c4, certainly your ballot issue campaign was involved a heavy non-tax deductible expenditure. Yes. And then finally the political party and political campaign activity, which has no tax benefits, whatever. My question is, and in part because Judy and I are trying to do work in the same 3 arenas on a lesser scale than you are by quite a bit, how do you handle the tension among the 3 and the allocation problems when you could devote all your time, talent, money probably to any one of them?
Depends who's in the best sales position at the time, I think.
Yeah, it does require, I guess, in the situation we grew up with, one comment would be that you do need to be very discerning when you sit down and deal with issues, what hat you're wearing, what role you're playing. And we just try to do that prayerfully as best we're able. And we don't sit down and do political donation discussions at the same time that we review our charitable and community work. We segment them a bit and try to be diligent about what hat we have on at a given time, whether it's an involvement in a program or what we're fundraising for. We just try to be very articulate about that, obviously for record-keeping purposes, but also more for emotionally so that we really give particular focus. Where you end up spending your time and your talent, that's something that I would hope that we all consider prayerfully. And there are, I believe, and I think we would believe that Christians can be used in all 3 of those categories very powerfully, and that where the Lord leads each of us is an adventure that each of us have to truly seek out and seek where it is that He places our skills and our gifts and our passions and what areas of our life He blesses to encourage us to continue to stay involved.
And I think there are different seasons too. Our giving in each of those areas has changed in every year. When I have been more directly involved with partisan activities, we have devoted more of our resources to support and to supplement those activities. So I think it's not something that you have to look at in a rigid fashion, but really evaluate on a year-by-year basis or periodically.
Right over here. Question was, what's the philosophy of transfer of generational wealth, and how have you developed that philosophy and that practice?
We have developed it by example from our parents, and I would say that our parents' philosophies have been very consistent, and I think we are pretty much in sync with how we view transferring wealth to the next generation. We think it's important that our children understand the responsibility they have before they're faced with the responsibility. And so we've been trying to start training them in that regard. And I know that there was a session today, I believe, that talked about some of the specific areas in which that could be accomplished. I can't say that we're experts in it in any regard, and Alyssa would probably tell you as much. But I think, our philosophy has been learned from our parents, and because we did share very similar philosophy, I think we're very consistent in how we view that.
Yeah, we have made plans and provision to pass on financial resources to our children, in addition to charitable intent that we have, and our goal would be that the children would use those resources, hopefully, and Lord willing, in a manner very, very consistent with what we would have. And it was sort of a question: you can stick it all in a foundation. You can put all your money into a charitable foundation. That's fine. You're going to trust then a group of trustees, or you're going to trust your children to be responsible and act responsibly. So we have chosen to pass forward funds to our children, and yet to do it in a way that prepares them and helps them to appreciate and understand the value of work, the value of the funds they've been given, and the importance and the responsibility. I would use the word obligation then, to give out of what blessing has been passed to them. And our children are, just so you know where we're at life-wise too, our children are 19 to age 10, so we're still sort of early on in that process.
Well, and I would just add too, none of our parents ever mandated that we give, but because they were such great examples to us, it was not even a discussion about how we would begin our marriage and our family and relationship. It was always a part of our marriage from day one. And, to a person, our siblings are pretty much have the same approach. And so I guess, that being said, I think that the actions of our parents have spoken much louder than the words over the years.
One more question way in the back. Have you had any success in encouraging other believers to enter into politics, because this can be a calling?
I would say yes. There have been a number of people with whom I've worked over the years who are in positions of influence, either in elective office or in key staff positions with elected officials. I don't think my conversations with them have been as intentional about urging them because they are believers, but if they have an interest in and an obvious gift to be involved politically, I have certainly tried wherever possible to encourage them to pursue politics, to pursue public policy life, because you are right, we do need more believers involved in it. And it is not an easy arena in which to be involved because you do get beat up a lot. And, I have people ask me all the time, how can you possibly stand to be involved in it? I don't know how. I mean, I did not set out when I was in college to be involved in partisan politics. It was something that just happened. And if anybody had asked me a few years ago if I would ever have wanted to be a state party, chairman of a partisan party, I would have said, no, I don't have those goals. But, God put me in those places, and to the extent that I can encourage others who for, unexplainable reasons find themselves heading in that direction too, I have done that and will continue to do so because it is critically important that we have believers involved in public life.
Betsy was really very modest. She was chairman of the Michigan Party, and because of her own witness, her own example, quietly, not wearing, John 3:16 on her shirt, but because it was clear to her allies and her adversaries alike that she was principled, that she had a clear vision of what it was that was her worldview, her political view, and she executed it in a Christ-like manner. And that gained her respect on both sides of the aisle. It demonstrated, I think, in a very powerful way to a lot of people who are now in political office, seeking or considering being involved in politics, because they saw that, Betsy DeVos could do it, and she could live, and she could maintain that walk and that witness and make an impact and a difference within the community. And so she understates what she has done in terms of being able to encourage others. And she's actively now recruiting candidates to run for state office in Michigan today, very actively involved in encouraging and developing, but also being a great example. And as we all know, we've heard it about our kids. It's just so true within communities. We can talk until we're blue in the face, but an example is worth 1,000 words. And Betsy's been a wonderful example, and I'm very, very proud of her.
Let's thank Dick and Betsy. Two things. Again, there's going to be the up close and personal, and there's dessert out in the back. Grab your dessert. Go to the Boojum room. And I don't know if Steve Ferguson wants me to announce this or not, but there is it okay? All right, because it's in the program. New developments in creative mass media. If you've not been a part of an informal discussion with Steve Ferguson, you have not lived. So, and I just hope you can live through it. But if you have any interest in creative mass media, I would encourage you to go spend time with Steve. Now let's close. Let's be grateful to God for this time we've had. Lord, we are your people, sheep of your pasture. You are our shepherd. And we will lie down tonight in peace. And we will rest. Lord, thank you for an example that is worth 1,000 words in both Dick and Betsy. Thank you for their parents, for generations of parents who have believed and not just taught, but lived it out. Lord, we thank you for this room full of believers. Thank you for the temple that's not made with human hands. And that you are our shield, our protector, our Savior. So we offer up this day to you. And we offer up tomorrow. And we ask for a great day. These things we pray and we ask and we are grateful for. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Y'all have a great evening.